All right. Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Welcome to Weekly Bits. Today is Friday, June 12th, and we are currently on block number 634,007. Welcome to the show. We're going to do a quick recap of the past week, starting with Lebanon. I don't know if you guys have been seeing what's going on in Lebanon, but the Lebanese pound has dropped to new lows against the dollar, stoking protests and riots against the Lebanese banking system. Currently, $1 equals 5,000 pounds. Back in October of last year, $1 equals 1,500 pounds. That's a 70% drop in versus the dollar since October. And with that goes the Lebanese people's ability to purchase food and medicine and other necessities. For a TLDR of how Lebanon got to this point, basically, there have been decades of mismanagement and corruption in the government that led to protests back in October of last year. Ultimately, that led to the resignation of Lebanese prime minister. Things weren't improving, though, and the protests continued until March, when, due to the coronavirus, the country went on lockdown. This lockdown, unsurprisingly, accelerated the economic decline in the country as businesses went bankrupt and unemployment spiked, and the government became increasingly insolvent. Then, the government defaulted on a $1.2 billion Eurobond payment, which is the first time that Lebanon defaulted on a foreign bond debt in its history. The bank started imposing tight restrictions on citizens' ability to buy USD in hopes of plugging the sinking ship that is the Lebanese pound. And that forcing of the citizens to go down with the ship is basically what has drawn the ire of Lebanese citizens as they've seen their wealth and purchasing power drop through the floor. In other news, the Federal Reserve on Wednesday had a press conference to address our economic situation. This is the first press conference since the Fed has had since expanding our money supply by approximately $2.9 trillion. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell went on to say that due to weak demand, that 2.9 trillion hasn't resulted in any inflation, which indicates that stocks still don't count towards the Fed's basket of goods, which they measure inflation by. And it just goes to show that the economy will always look good if you carefully select the terms by which you define it. In a great washing of sins, Powell claimed that our monetary policy has nothing to do with rising inequality. Quote, "Inequality is something that's been with us increasingly for more than 4 decades. It's not really related to monetary policy, or it's more related to, there are a lot of theories on what causes it, but it's been something that's more or less been going up consistently for more than 4 decades. I wonder what else has been going up consistently for more than 4 decades. For those of us worried about the long-term effects of this quantitative easing, or that'll never end, Powell reassured everyone that, quote, when the time comes, we will put these tools back in the toolbox. Just like how they sent interest rates back to pre-08 financial crisis levels once the stock market reached all-time highs and unemployment reached all-time lows. Wait, that never happened." Moving on, the Human Rights Foundation, a nonprofit that seeks to protect human rights around the world, has joined the wave of groups committing large grants to Bitcoin development. This week, it pledged $50,000 to Chris Belcher, the developer behind the CoinSwap protocol, because of that technology's potential to improve Bitcoin's privacy. The money is coming from a new Bitcoin development fund it has established, which already has a similar $50,000 donation planned for the near future. Basically, CoinSwap was first proposed in 2013 by Blockstream's co-founder Greg Maxwell to leverage atomic swaps and exchange Bitcoin and keep the swap from being identified on the blockchain. Belcher is working on an implementation that would ensure coin swaps are conducted correctly, thus masking activity from third parties. This privacy feature aligns with the Human Rights Foundation's fight for freedom from authoritarianism around the globe, and it's cool to see their support. For more information on the story and CoinSwap in general, check out our recent coverage from Aaron Van Werdum on BitcoinMagazine.com. Earlier this week, Microsoft's decentralized identity system built on top of Bitcoin called Ion launched its beta on Mainnet. To speak a little bit more about the project, we've invited Peter Chihuahua, Bitcoin Magazine editor, onto the show. Peter, Let's see if we can get you on here. Are you there?
What's up, Brandon?
How's it going?
I'm doing well. Thanks very much for having me on the show.
Well, thank you for jumping on. So I've got a couple questions for you, and the first one is pretty basic. What is Ion?
So Ion was first announced in May 2019, and it got some buzz in the Bitcoin space, I think mostly because Microsoft's name was attached to it. The basic technical idea, as I understand it, is that Ion would be a layer 2 network. There would be dedicated Ion nodes running to secure decentralized identities. Ion calls these DIDs, and that's kind of a shorthand I'm seeing elsewhere for this new concept of a decentralized identity. These nodes would timestamp the DIDs onto the Bitcoin blockchain, and then you'd be able to use them to kind of replace the way you have all sorts of different credentials, usernames, and passwords across the internet. And this would probably add some kind of layer of security and ease of use to that. The other thing I'd point out is that DIDs, the concept is that they leverage public and private keys the same way that Bitcoin transactions do. They authenticate publicly, but also privately protected. And I mean, from my point of view, Microsoft kind of deserves a lot of credit for building this on top of Bitcoin. A lot of Bitcoiners would say, obviously, you should build it on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's the most robust blockchain available. But large entities like Microsoft tend to build these kind of things on sort of like private enterprise blockchains, which is lame. So props to Microsoft for kind of pursuing Bitcoin as the fundamental layer for this idea.
Totally. And I mean, if you want security, you're going to have to use Bitcoin's blockchain because no other one is secure like Bitcoin's is. So
weird. Not everybody sees it that way, but I agree with you.
They'll get there. So I guess following up with that, what's important about this week's mainnet launch? What's the significance?
Yeah, I don't know that the mainnet launch, to be honest, is that significant. It's like a beta. I do think it's a milestone worthy of note, and we covered it at Bitcoin Magazine for that reason. Also being like a reminder of like, hey, there's this pretty significant potential second layer network aside from Lightning. And again, a lot of the buzz on this is like because Microsoft is involved. That's why I personally am particularly interested in the project. I do think it's an important step towards what I've read is another milestone that Ion is shooting for, which would be like to start creating an actual user-friendly tool that people can leverage to kind of actually start creating their DIDs and experiment with this and use this. I think that in previous Bitcoin Magazine coverage, a founder of the project at Microsoft envisioned this as kind of like a Google Authenticator. So that would be obviously very easy to use. And so this might be a step towards an actual DID Google style authenticator, which would be pretty sweet.
That's awesome. And it's always great to hear, really cool things being built on Bitcoin. Well, I mean, that basically covers everything from what I understand. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I do just want to emphasize like this. I hope Microsoft kind of choosing Bitcoin to build it on and just kind of, I don't want to speak from their perspective, but accepting the fact that Bitcoin's already built out this super robust technology they can use for this solution rather than kind of sacrificing any control they might have by trying to reinvent the wheel and make their own blockchain to build it on. As you say, they will get there. I do think other corporations are going to realize, like, let's just build this on Bitcoin. We don't need to control everything. People want to use Bitcoin, et cetera. And I don't know. I'm kind of big on, like, maybe this is Lightning Network number 2 is going to be some kind of decentralized ID manager built on Bitcoin. I like that concept a lot.
That is a good concept. Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining us. And where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm writing over at bitcoinmagazine.com. I covered this in an article this week, so check that out at our homepage if you haven't. You can follow me at Peter Chawaga on Twitter. Chawaga is Chawaga. Thanks for having me, Brandon.
Perfect. Thank you, Pete. All right, and that does it for the show today. I mean, it's short and sweet. We got a good recap of the week, and you know, as Matt Odell says, stay humble, stack sats. See you guys.